Hello, everyone. It's been a while. This is actually episode 33, the magic number. And no jokes, it just took us 33 minutes exactly to get this new app to work. Because obviously, Skype has been disconnected and we use Skype and it was a piece of shit. So hopefully, it's for the best that we have transitioned. And we attempted to begin this podcast, episode 33, at 3 o'clock. And because nothing works in society anymore, which is why our few audience members are tuning in right now to share their animosity and anger against the state, it took us exactly 33 minutes, no joke, for that to work, which cannot be a coincidence on episode 33. And when we start recording, it's now obviously 35 past 2 minutes. Right. So, James, that's my intro. Would you like to add something?
Numerology is indeed the somewhat of a foundation, not completely intrinsic. As the actual numerals themselves are man-made, but as a measuring system for underlying metrics in this paradigm, numbers are a practical vessel for that. And yeah, the Pope died recently. Don't know if anyone saw that. And people that have been listening for the past 33 episodes will know that, I'm often talking about numbers and I'm always talking about cusps. And the Pope died on the 21st of April. Yeah. So, if you believe in coincidences, I guess you believe in around Earth and Bin Laden flying planes and, the World Trade Center and all kinds of silly stuff and like Neil Armstrong going to the moon. But yeah, once again, there's a symbolic, ritualistic event involving infamous individual, somebody who is, at least as far as the official narrative is concerned, an important figure who dies on a cusp, 21st of April.
I mean, I don't believe any of these people die, and for the most part, many of them aren't real to begin with, or they take existing characters that have charisma and are able to, wield their authority amongst the people. And then, if they don't conform to whatever is supplied by the status quo, if they don't play ball, they get killed off and they just get replicated. And people just don't grasp how easy it is now to literally most likely clone an individual, but at the very least, in terms of just the operations,
Falsify the death.
yeah, but even just on Hollywood sets, the technology that's available, if you don't have a budget, if you have infinite capital and you have all the technology available to you, to literally create an almost perfect version of any other being is just out there. I can go into a shop and spend $1,000 on a pretty high grade mask that's gonna, make me look like a 75-year-old man or something like that. You see all YouTubers doing this kind of stuff, and these are people that are spending a couple of thousand. Imagine if you have a couple of million, a couple of billion to spend. Anything's feasible. I don't buy that these people are real most of the time. I really, really don't. And of course, there's all kinds of stories to be had, especially with the area of kind of celebrity status. People like the Beatles. What's his fucking name? I always forget. Excuse my French.
What, Paul McCartney?
Paul McCartney.
Yeah.
The idea that he's actually dead and he was replaced with another talented musician who happened to look visually super similar. So, and this is something that's super common. People like Fidel Castro in the official narrative had hundreds of doubles, many of whom were assassinated, if we're to believe that. But for sure, influential characters have doubles. That's something that's just a reality, commonsensical fact. If you're, a person of authority, throughout the distant past, you always have people imitating you to protect your life. If you're someone that was under threat. So, fuck, man, who knows what to believe anymore? It's all just nonsense. And what's crazy is that this just came into my mind, right? I've been traveling now for over a decade, basically, pretty much non-stop. And often I return to the same countries. And in this period of time, and kind of thinking back to when I was a child and things that you see with respect to technology, just general advancement when it comes to anything, infrastructure, tech, etc. So many places haven't moved an inch. Like literally, there's been zero progression in most of the countries that I visit, and in many cases, there's been a regression. Like, and simultaneously, well, most of the societies are regressing or staying relatively stagnant or progressing a minuscule amount. Those in a position of authority that have access to all the technology that set the trend, that own the monetary system, that create everything that we know, they're moving at light speed. They're so far ahead in everything. It's unbelievable. I was complaining to various people actually, just as a micro example. It's everywhere. Here in Kyrgyzstan, where I am now, I'd left this place in 2022. It's 2025. The same road which they were constructing in 2022, which was probably already under construction for years before, hasn't moved an inch in 3 years. It's a fucking road. You literally get some Chinese people and they build it for you in a day. And it's all a scam, obviously. Part of it's corruption and everything. On the surface level, monetary corruption, someone pocketing a few million here, maintaining it so it never gets completed, so they get more and more money from from the government or their buddies. But realistically, that's a micro of the macro on every level. Everything is constantly curbed to prevent everyone else from getting anywhere near those that have absolute authority. It's just fucking a joke. And this example, excuse my French again, this example that we introduced with just trying to make a phone call for free and be able to record it in 2025 on a brand new smartphone with Wi-Fi, everything that you need, took us over 30 minutes. And before we started using Riverside, we were using Skype, which has now been discontinued. Just remember all of those problems. And it's all intentional. It's all intentional. Okay, I've got rid of that anger, James. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. They have, we have the ability and resources for there to be no issues in the world. I think we've probably had that since like
Day one.
yeah, pretty much. In fact, in the past 100 years, we've just created new ways to kill, maim, intoxicate, and pollute. Um, but at the same time, there are so like everything. At least from like a dream perspective or like a completely idealistic perspective, since like at least like the 90s. We've had everything in terms of like video consoles, in terms of like entertainment, yeah, and just in terms of what we know about resonance frequencies, how to heal, molecular science. I mean, everything needed to resolve all issues, finances, economy, sustainability, all of these things, like, can be implemented, but, by design, by satanic design, by Zionist design, by globalist design, we've got this system that has this perpetual cycle where it has to feed off of energy. Instead of creating positive energy, they have to create negative energy for them to harness, and sexual energy and energy of pain and destruction and trauma, because these things have contain a lot of energy. Like, there's that saying, people remember negative things more than they remember positive things. People remember, the people that hurt them maybe more than the person who opened the door for them, when they were, entering a shop or something, because those sorts of things, taken for granted. They're normal because I suppose, naturally we're social creatures. And when something, that goes against, who you are happens, it causes this trauma that you remember, because our natural state is to kind of like be social and to generally be happy, unless you're a psycho or sociopath or there's something. But for most people, And when we have these like negative experiences, like we really hold on to them. So there's like a spiritual trend mutation that's happening. There's also like an occult aspect to it and a esoteric aspect to these things, whereby we are literally living in a very sick, twisted movie script. It's almost like a real life snuff movie because, all of these wars are planned. People's, lives are ritually sacrificed all the time. And a great point that John made earlier on is that I can almost guarantee you that Pope Francis isn't dead. And the reason why I can almost guarantee that is because they made a point of having an open casket to show you his dead body, allegedly, quote unquote, dead body. And yeah, somebody, a character, a puppet of that magnitude is probably a clone. So yeah,
That's an interesting point as well, actually, because they have a habit of promoting high-level Masons in open caskets. You can see Lenin at one point. Stalin was he may still well be somewhere. Let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? Where the body is. There's a chemical that they use. It begins with F. Do you know what I mean?
formaldehyde. Is it
Formaldehyde. Yeah. Yeah, no, it is.
formaldehyde?
It is
Yeah,
formaldehyde. They use it to preserve the flesh, and often the
yeah,
ingredients are available for the masses. Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam, the leader of the Chinese Communist Rebellion, the Vietnamese Communist Rebellion is visible in the same fashion as Lenin is in Moscow. And of course, you have people like Walt Disney that are supposedly cryogenically frozen, and no doubt that probably works. I mean, you can freeze a sperm and bring it back to life after tens of thousands of years. So there's no reason as to why that isn't viable for all living creatures. Of course, the science that they provide the average person that thinks they're an intellect because they've got a fucking degree from X university in X country, they're provided a curbed and capped version of knowledge. And so,
yeah.
you've got all the idiots that come back and say, well, no, that's not possible because according to the science that I read that was published by this Mason in 1943, it's just not feasible. And these are the same fucking idiots that would have said, oh, in the 1943, there's no way you can have a mobile phone. There's no way things like Skype could ever exist. There's no way you can have
Yeah.
a hoverboard because it's not feasible at this moment in time. Science is a constant progression. And for the average being, that progression is 3, 4, 5 decades, if not 1,000 years behind what those that create the fashion and the trend have available to them. Because of course, we've talked about on this channel before the resets and how really everything is it's a system of reset. The financial system as a whole, order through chaos. You build and you deconstruct, and that's how you retain authority. It's like buying back into the market when it's on a dip. You gain more leverage, you have more capital behind you, and if you keep repeating that, you gain a bigger and bigger chunk of the market until you own the market outright. But it will always reach the point that if you own the market outright, there's nothing else to take, and therefore you have to reset it to ensure that you're perpetually building to retain the authority over the mass man. So, and that's what we're reaching now. We've already reached the point where there's just infinite debt on paper. And I tell people this all the time, economic theory, economic practice, economics as a subject matter, which is actually nonsensical, and the name was changed. Originally, it should be called the political economy because an economy is fluid and it's subjective based on where you are in the world. Economics promotes the idea that something is an absolute, and that's just not the case. But regardless, what they teach is that there's a cause and effect for everything. Well, if there's a fucking cause and effect for everything, and it took 1,000 years to pay off, it would have taken 1,000 years under Gordon Brown to pay off the bloody UK national debt at that time, having just paid off the World War II debt of the United States officially. Then the debt that's been accrued since then for pretty much every country in the world cannot be paid off for tens of thousands of years. And that's with all the added debt that's being accrued each and every day on top of that, which means that the entire system is fugazi. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, it's becoming so obvious now to even the dumbest and dimmest of, let's say, economists or lecturers of the field that they have to now reset it. They have to reset it, if not just for their own good, but for an insurance against any potential rise up, which would never happen, of course. But if you want to take that stance, by all means do. The reality is it's going to be reset regardless of what the reason is, because that's always been the way. And we have this this cycle available to us visually. Things like the pyramids, every ancient structure, irrespective of what ancient may mean, whether that really is 100 years or 100,000 years or 1,000 years, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's from a period equal, at the very least, to our own, but likely more technologically advanced.
Mm.
They destroy and they rebuild, they destroy and they rebuild. It's rotational grazing. It's business practice. That's what people don't realize. It's business practice. Why give someone an iPhone 25, technologically speaking, when you can give them an iPhone 1? And 25 years you can give them, 25 years from then you can give them the iPhone 25 technologically, and by which point you'll have an iPhone 100 in terms of the difference in device capabilities. And that's all they do. It's just a constant rotation. It's a standard business acumen, and people just don't see it because most people aren't sadistic enough to want to put a bullet through their neighbor's head. But they forget that the people that control, that produce the bullets, that produce the tanks, that create all of these weapons, have absolutely no care for the average person, and they happily, each and every day of their lives, tread all over us. So, this is a big problem and a massive gap in people's critical thought process. They can't comprehend what they don't know, and they don't know it because they don't do anything. They don't step outside their comfort zone. They don't take a hit at something that they're not comfortable with undertaking, and they're never going to build character, and therefore they're never going to be able to understand, even in its slightest form, what it may be like to be that sociopath that's crumpling each and every country under its toes and nails every day. It's fucking mad, and it's so simple. I look at people and I think, good God, how fucking stupid are you? And then I realise, you're more stupid than I possibly could ever comprehend, and that's the scarier part of it, because people are like animals for the most part, like a dog, where they bark and occasionally they react. And that's why when you look at history, it's not the billionaire in his Hugo Boss suit on the front line chopping people's heads off. It's the guy that was working as a machinist or a doctor or a police officer or whatever part of the society that individual was, involved in the day before, and they're there chopping their neighbour's head off because Mr. Hugo Boss suit tells them that person's got the bloody plague, or that person's their enemy, even though yesterday they were brother and sister. And people just do whatever it takes, because they're completely self-reliant on the state system, because they've never actually undertaken anything themselves. Their character is a construct of the state, not of their own individuality, because individuality doesn't actually exist for most people.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
God,
People, yeah, I mean, people, being brainwashed, there's an element of brainwashing involved. And there's also an element of, I would say willful ignorance in some cases as a coping mechanism. Because, I mean, honestly, like, how anybody can justify, I don't know, Israel like bombing babies, for example, and it's just like, oh yeah, we'll be allies to that. And it doesn't just happen like once. It's not like a one-off accident. Like, it's every single day they're just shelling the fuck out of these like women and children. And the whole world sees it, and nobody genuinely believes that's right. Even the most staunch, twisted sicko Zionists that will, go on national TV and say, yeah, we'll defend, we'll bomb Palestine until it's gone. For example, even they know that, they go to and they know that they're sick, twisted, wicked people. They know this, but they'll say things because there are no consequences. So there are no consequences to supporting Israel because Israel are the head of the global snake, for lack of a better term. So, it's about survival and supporting the winning side, which one necessarily wouldn't call stupidity, but it's an absolute lack of morality. And that's pretty stark. Yeah, there's a lot of that around. So,
It's a bit like football, isn't it? When you take, a team's doing really well in the league, say Man City or Man United before them, and they have so many international fans, their
Yeah,
shirts, their
glory
jerseys would sell
hunters.
out. Exactly. People were like, yeah, I've been a Man United supporter since the day I was born. I love them no matter what happens. Yeah, they start doing shit and half those fans disappear. And it's the
Yeah,
same principle when it comes to morality. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm really
100%.
moral. I'm super good. I would always protect children. I would stand up for the old lady in the street. Fake COVID pandemic comes along and everyone is jabbing their kids with poison, trying to put their neighbours in jail, literally trying to put their neighbours in jail. People are being forcibly evicted out of their houses, beaten, being swabbed in the nose with truncheons and guns blazed at their faces. And all those people that the day before were like, yeah, I'm an anarchist. I stand up for people. Yeah, oh my God, like liberation, free Palestine. These people never do anything. It's all image, it's all aesthetic, and it's 99% of the population. And we've seen that live feed. We were in Berlin as unjabbed and unmasked individuals in a place of the world that is regarded with the stereotype of being kind of like the front line of anarchy,
Liberalism.
call it liberalism. And we can promise the audience, having likely not been there at that point, that it's all nonsense. And arguably, Berlin was probably one of the most totalitarian places. I think it took about 10 seconds of leaving the airport before we got shouted at. And ironically, it was by an English guy on the train. Put your mask on. I also
Yeah.
remember being smirked at by a Hasidic Jew on a metro that still bothers me to this day. The evil notions of running through that person's head, I could see expressed on their lips, and it was just awful. This is the kind of person that would happily bomb a Palestinian kid in a second. After revisiting the basement of their synagogue, where we know mass forms of child abuse happen all the time, but at least in that New York synagogue. What happened to that, by the way? I love how again we
Um,
reveal these things on TV and no one hears about them
what
again.
happened?
Yeah,
I mean,
nothing, of course. Nothing.
what always happens when certain groups, have certain accusations made against them? Not much, not much. I'm pretty sure it was, swept under the rug. In fact, wasn't there like this fake arrest video that came out? Do you remember? There was this arrest
Oh,
video.
no. That's unrelated, but that is another one. It's another
Ah,
movie
right,
as well. It's
okay,
supposedly
yeah,
a Jewish, and yeah, that was the fakest video I've ever seen in my life. You shared it with me, actually.
right, yeah, okay. So yeah, so it wasn't that one, but yeah, in that case, I can assure you next to nothing. Because yeah, as we know, certain things roll onto themselves. There was just, yeah. I mean, we're at a point now where, as we've discussed before, like there almost is no hope. It's like there was this really simplistic phrase that that someone said to me once one time, and it's just like stuck with me, and it's like you either get it or you don't. Or you either want to get it or you don't would be like 2.0 of that. But essentially, it's like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't drink. You can't make it drink. And there's, more info. I mean, there's a lot of information. You know, granted, there is a lot of deliberate censorship on topics. Like the way things have changed in the Google algorithm and the YouTube algorithm. It's, things have been buried under like hundreds and hundreds of pages before you get like a legitimate result. Um, Especially when it comes to things like, flat Earth or, vaccine stuff. And yeah, but, I think flat Earth is probably like the prime example of that. It's like, any video that exposes that truth, they make sure that they have a caption underneath the video that says flat Earth is an archaic, untrue concept. And when it's far from it, it's the complete opposite. It's the absolute truth, and that people now today need to realize that everything in regards to NASA and the whole space industry is a lie. And then another thing that's happened this week recently, once again, we've had numerology to this. 6 women celebrities were allegedly well, yeah, falsely shot up to space in this vessel, and like it's just like, oh my god. And they come back down, and like Katy Perry was one of them. Another one was like this
Oh,
70-year-old woman,
yeah.
and it's just like, Jeff, it's Amazon were the guys who sent this vessel up allegedly, and it's just complete mockery when this thing lands. Like the door like opens inwards, which just doesn't even make any sense. And they pretend, and then they realize that the door's actually been it's probably like Jeff Bezos goes up to the door. The lady opens the door from the inside when the script was Bezos was supposed to open it from the outside because he had this special Allen key. This thing was like literally no more technological than an Allen key, but it was just like a large one that he put in to turn, and then this door that was literally like a centimeter thick. Even the way the door collapsed inwards, it just looked like a fucking playpen of like a nursery. It was just like ridiculous. And like this is the level of effort they need to put in now. There's like 8-bit graphics, like literally like Alex the Kid in 1997, 8-bit graphics, like Commodore 64 shit of India's moon landing. It literally looks like a fucking episode of Button Moon. And like this is what they can like literally pass on like CNN and can show this to the masses, and it goes unchallenged. This is how far gone we are. So the people listening to this, and the people in like smaller communities, like be really grateful for who you are, that you have the principles to embrace and douse your mind in truth, because you really are in a very small percentile of humanity. I think a lot more people on a subconscious level know that they support things that that are nefarious, but it's the ultimate cowardice. It's the ultimate cowardice that enables a lot, and brainwashing, and in a lot of cases stupidity as well. But I think bottom line is there's little to no hope, and they show you that from what they can get away with. Anything you'd like to add?
It's a good thing to bring up how it is important to take a positive stance, and for those listening, and ourselves included, to realise that no matter what happens, we must acknowledge that it's better to understand truth rather than be kept in the dark. Light betters darkness. That's just the reality of at least our interpretation of goodness. But I would imagine that's a universal, even for those that don't have the light and follow the dark. They themselves would love to have the light. They would love nothing else than to have the confidence and not have cowardice. But unfortunately, it is the way it is, and I concur that I don't think there's any way out. As we stated earlier, as I mentioned, I believe the world works in reset stages. It's an infinite cycle of build and then deconstruct, and consequently, the conversation we're having now is probably no different to a conversation that happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, irrespective of what technology may have been available. It's really the same discussions over and over again, and there's always going to be a minority of people that understand the reality or the best of it, and they try to maneuver their way out of it or find a solution to live comfortably without it. But I think that the trick to comfort is just truth. It's really that simple. It doesn't matter if you working 15 hours a day in a labor camp with mud up to your neck. Not that I've ever done that. And so some might say, "Wow, how can you say that?" But knowing who you are and understanding truth to the best of your ability is such a satisfying thing. For those that have never had it, I really pity them, and that's the majority of people. The majority of